Mike was a soldier. Mike, I believe he was 18. We're going to watch a clip where I believe he says his age, but Mike enlisted and he was there, you know, the very day that we invaded Iraq. And he now spends his days giving speeches and taking actions and reporting on the lies that got us into the Iraq war, that got us into Afghanistan, the profiteering and the realities on the ground there in Iraq and Afghanistan. And he, yeah, again, he's a true badass. But last night, took it to another level. I don't want to give too much away because it's really like best if you just watch it. But George W. Bush, as he does, is giving speeches. And right now he is in the LA area. And last night he was in Beverly Hills. So Mike paid him a little visit. Right during George W. Bush's speech, Mike had some important words to say. Colin, if you can go ahead and play that clip.
My dad used them, and he would have said, send your smart people down here before I give you any advice. But it was awesome to have him alive. And Mother, of course, was around too. And she
Mr. Bush, when are you going to apologize for the million Iraqis that are dead because you lied? You lied about weapons of mass destruction. You lied about connections to 9/11. You lied about Iraq being a threat. You sent me to Iraq. You sent me to Iraq in 2003. My friends are dead. Joshua Castile. You killed people. You lied. You lied about WMD. A million Iraqis are dead because you lied. My friends are dead because you lied. You need to apologize. Apologize. Apologize.
Are you with this gentleman? No.
you know, one of the things I
Is she
don't
with this
miss
gentleman?
is,
Did she come in with him or is she with you?
Colin, I'm going to have you play that again. This time I want everybody to listen, not only to Mike's words, but listen to what George W. Bush says to Mike during it. It's easy to miss, but listen closely.
I used them, my dad used them, and he would have said, send your smart people down here before I give you any advice. But it was awesome to have him alive. And Mother, of course, was around too. And she had
Mr. Bush, when are you going to apologize for the million Iraqis that are dead because you lied? You lied about weapons of mass destruction. You lied about connections to 9/11. You lied about Iraq being a threat. You sent me to Iraq. You sent me to Iraq in 2003. My friends are dead. Joshua Castile. You killed people. You lied. You lied about WMD. A million Iraqis are dead because you lied. My friends are dead because you lied. You need to apologize. Apologize. Apologize.
Are you with this gentleman? No.
you know, one of the
So what George Bush says to this Iraq war veteran is to sit down and behave himself. Colin, if you can pull up Mike's tweet that shows that. So we can read, actually, Colin, we can start at the top of his thread where he says, almost 20 years after he sent me to Iraq, I disrupted George W. Bush's speech tonight. I tried to read a list of names, mostly of Iraqis killed, as well as my friends who became anti-war activists after Iraq and who then died of suicide or other war wounds. They ripped up my list. By the way, I contacted Mike, was going to be on today, and I'll explain why he wasn't able to make it today after all. Well, I can tell you right now. It's because they're doing another action today. There's a second speech being given today in a different location. So you can pull that back up, Colin. So, and I also, he emailed me the list of names that he was going to read, the one that they ripped up. So he tweeted, also on my list of names, the victims in the collateral murder video, shout out to Chelsea Manning, Nisour Square massacre, as well as U.S. troops killed in Iraq, whose parents then formed the powerful anti-war organization Gold Star Families for Peace. Bush should never know peace for the lives he destroyed. Then Mike realizes, because when you're there in the moment, in a moment like that, it's hard to know everything that's going on. So he says, okay, so apparently you can hear in the video, Bush tells me to sit down and behave yourself. Not exactly the apology I asked for. So definitely badass to Mike. So here's what he says. Nearly 20 years ago, in July 2002, I sat behind then President George W. Bush as he gave a speech to my Army unit, the 10th Mountain Division. Less than a year later, I was in Iraq on Bush's orders as part of the U.S. invasion. Tonight, as Bush spoke at a so-called Distinguished Speaker Series event in Beverly Hills, with the cheapest tickets starting at over $500, I again watched from the crowd before confronting the event. Primarily, I demanded he apologize for the 1 million or more dead who are only dead because of his lies and his crimes. When George W. Bush took the nation to war in Iraq, he did so with the full knowledge that Iraq possessed none of the weapons of mass destruction he told the country he knew existed. He did so with full knowledge that Iraq posed no threat to the people of the United States, despite his assuring the country that it did. He did so with full knowledge that the Iraqi government had no connection to the September 11th attacks, but he sold the lie that such a connection could exist. I want to play some additional clips to add context. He says, so much you could say to Bush, but this is what inspired me to demand an apology from him. And so we're going to watch a video that, again, Mike says inspired him. And this is of a paralyzed Iraq War veteran's last words to George W. Bush.
I declare on behalf of us all, the human detritus, your words are kind. Those who will spend their lives in unending pain and grief. I write this letter, my last letter, to you, Mr. Bush and Mr. Cheney. I write not because I think you grasp the terrible human and moral consequence of your lies. I write this letter because before my own death, I want to make it clear that I and hundreds of thousands of my fellow veterans know fully who you are and what you've done. You may have faced justice, but in our eyes you are each guilty of egregious war crimes, of plunder, and finally of murder, including the murder of thousands of young Americans, my fellow veterans, whose future you stole.
So Mike has been, even before this, for a very, very long time, Mike has been traveling the country, even the world, talking about his experiences. And while we won't play the whole thing, we'll play about 5 minutes of it, skipping around a bit. I highly recommend everybody watch the full thing, though. This is Mike in 2012 talking about his experiences.
The rules of engagement were such that you could essentially kill anyone you wanted and get away with it, and it would be okay. And in a military inundated and indoctrinated with racism and chauvinism, that if soldiers or private mercenaries wanted to make Iraq their shooting range, they could do it. But it was beyond an environment that allowed forces to run wild. It was a matter of policy. I remember soldiers from the 4th Infantry Division, who I ended up being attached to an armored division that rolled into Tikrit, talking about how when they rolled into the city with tanks and armored vehicles, they rolled in just shooting in all directions. Shooting tank guns, shooting heavy machine guns, just in all directions to let the Iraqi people know that we were there and that they shouldn't mess with them. Soldiers and Marines who've been to Iraq will tell you that some were ordered to shoot anybody carrying a shovel in a country that has a lot of farmers because most of their infrastructure had been destroyed. Anyone carrying a shovel should be shot. because maybe they were using it to dig an IED. That anyone carrying a cell phone should be shot. These were rules of engagement. Some will tell you of a rule known as 360-degree fire, which means anytime a bomb goes off or an IED goes off, the standard operating procedure or the orders are to shoot in 360 degrees in all directions, even in civilian areas where civilians would no doubtedly be killed. I have a little sister who's now 18, so she was 8 about at the time I deployed. I got her name tattooed on my arm before I left. Her name's Rachel. And we were ordered at this one point to kick these families out of their homes for whatever reason. And there was this 8-year-old girl who looked exactly like my sister. And it was my job to drag her out of her house as she was crying, as her parents were crying, as her siblings were crying, arrest the males in her family, put them on a truck and send them to those detention facilities. And I couldn't stop looking at her face because it was my sister's face. And I realized, that this girl was exactly like my sister. That man who was shot was exactly like my father. And that these people were just like my family. And then so what happened was I couldn't stop seeing that everything that we were doing to the Iraqi people, I was doing to my own family. Because they are our family. They're our brothers and sisters.
There are no words. Gosh, there are absolutely no words. I really hope everybody watches the full clip. We'll put it in the description.